anyone who's been to a Connecticut Energy Network gathering before knows that we tend to have soft endings. So if you need to go, please do so. But if you want to hang out and chat the way we would normally do over a meal, feel free to do that.
I have a question, and I may be way off, but so the offshore wind is included in this or not?
I don't think so, because it's so big, right? This is just up to 2 megawatts.
Okay, so yeah, I read something recently that said that one project is supposed to be 15% of the energy demand of the state. So is the governor able to just do another project like that, or what caused the sizing of that project the way it was?
Is this Vineyard Wind?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'll share what I know about this. I'm not an expert on this, but as you said, these are massive projects. They're typically right now being sited on federal leases, federally leased land, and actually, what the short answer is? There's a really good podcast which I would recommend to you. It's called Windfall. It's done by New Hampshire Public Radio, and it's got 5 segments, and it goes through the history of offshore wind, and it's just fascinating. And so there are federal leases. There are companies have purchased those leases, and then they're putting projects together to go onto those. So I think there's a bunch of these in the pipeline. There's another one. Is it Revolution Wind? I'm not sure.
Revolution Wind.
Yeah. And so what's to stop more of these? I'm not sure. I think it's a question of getting the leases on the sites, to actually build them, and then finding companies who able to actually provide the wherewithal to do this. And interestingly, a lot of these big ones are being done by former fossil fuel companies, Shell, BP, and others, because they're the ones that are able to marshal the type of financial resources that these projects require. And they've got often the offshore expertise.
I'll just throw in 2 cents to Diane's question. I think for that, so there's residential, there's the commercial tariff that we just talked about, there's utility scale, and then for utility scale, sometimes DEEP itself actually procures the energy. So they're the ones that said to Vineyard Wind and Revolution, we'll buy up to whatever amount it is. So I think it's really DEEP that might be the ones that are procuring that.
So I have a basic political question. If this decision about putting the cap so low came from the legislative committee, and Needleman's the chair of the legislative committee, what is behind that, and what are the politics behind it? I know Gary Winfield is the vice chair, and there's some definite clean energy advocates who are members of the committee, but what is the informal scuttlebutt about what's to be done to move the needle? No pun intended.
I think it's fascinating that maybe the biggest follow-up to this session today is not in the actual PURA decision, but it was sort of this 60 megawatt limit. I mean, we all share your question, Diane, and sort of, but I think one thing is clear. Mike Trahan talked about organizing a coalition. PACE is happy to play a role there if we can help, but we need an answer to that. We need to make our voices heard, and it was fascinating to me in this process to learn that other states don't have. They either have much higher caps or they don't have caps, and it's extremely frustrating. But let's stay in touch on that one. Maybe we'll have another meeting just on that.
If I could jump in on that, I think Jeff Massell laid out sort of a counterfactual that if you had 100 projects, some of them would bid in at a rate that would be beneficial to the ratepayer, and some of them would bid in at a rate that required subsidy from the ratepayer to make them go. And so just expanding on that, if the net effect was just an unlimited ratepayers, I think that would be a legitimate thing to understand. But it sounds like that's not always the case. So I'll take your question and add to it, Diane. I think I'd like to know what the ramifications of no cap would be to all parties involved.
Yeah, very interesting for me to get a better understanding of PURA's role, right? And I think I've heard that under Chair Gillette, PURA, I think, is maybe being more creative or taking some greater leeway in how they interpret the statutes, but they are also limited by the two biggest ones for me are the numerical caps to the size and the restriction that you can't build bigger than the load on site, because that's just if we could get rid of that, then whoever has room can put the solar, whether they have the load or not. They can build the solar where they can, and limiting that right now is just and other states don't do that. So that was really eye-opening for me
too.
Mark, can I make a comment?
Please.
Yeah, so Chris Kirk again. And so, I wanted to just mention considerations of what the benefits are of limiting behind the meter size or having a relationship towards on-site load. One of the unintended consequences that occurs when there isn't a limit of sizing relative to on-site load is that it literally can cripple the vast majority of the construction activities which occur within a state. Since 2017, this is exactly what has occurred in Massachusetts, where they did not have any type of association with on-site load, right? So you could have, in essence, a rural community with very few substations and single phase power. And then all of a sudden, now you have planned for over 100 megawatts of solar going in, right? It literally cripples the utility. And my experience in Connecticut is that the utilities do not have like a huge employment rank inside the distributed generation. And in Massachusetts, by not having any sizing limitations, it essentially crippled the utilities. And so projects that have been built in 2018 and 2019, some of which are still waiting to be interconnected, right? So there is a little bit of rationale to limit sizing to customer load.
So Chris, this is Bernie. That's really helpful. And one way to sort of phrase our request would be to reflect the infrastructure upgrade that a particular project would require. So to take your case, if there was three-phase power and proximity to a substation, and it was just sort of all good, we could say, have at it. We loosen up the relationship between size to load. To take your case, alternatively, to say if it's single phase power, you're far from a substation, there's not adequate distribution or transmission, then reflect that as a sort of a cost or a detriment to that bid. So.
Sure, no, I agree with that, Bernard. I mean, there is sort of a happy medium. You know, what I will tell you is that when Massachusetts Smart Program opened up, everybody flooded in from all over the country, right? And there was a deluge of applications, you know, into the utilities that literally, particularly with National Grid, you know, shut down the entire process, right, for over a year and a half.
Right. Chris, who are you associated with? What company?
So the company that I'm associated with is Solar and Soil, which
Solar
is
and Soil?
Solar and Soil, which is a nonprofit developer to, you know, to move forward renewable energy, and also right-sized planting for carbon sequestration
Oh,
and other philanthropic type of activities.
I think we speak for all of us. We're glad to make your acquaintance.
Well, pleasure to meet you guys. I think I've seen you folks at a couple of those PURA events, you know, going back into like the 2017 period of time, you know, before when the utilities were originally pushing this buy all sell all, you know. And just a quick comment, because I haven't participated in this overall process, but you know, the potential to follow and fall off the cliff like Massachusetts in this type of program, which is this essentially like the reverse auction kind of program, is, you know, is latent with defects, right? Because people want to win. You know, early innovators are like, you know, lower in price. And one of the things that's troubling with the head of the meter approach here in Connecticut is that, you know, it's going to be a 20-year fixed price all-in tariff that is fixed in 2021, right? And you know, the customer behind the meter, you know, he's still procuring his energy from Eversource or UI, and that rate will continue to increase, right? So in year one, there'll be a value of X, you know, and by year 16, there'll be the value of X at a, you know, at a discount, you know, based on the inflation of the utility costs between now and then. You know, so it's sort of interesting. I hope that the stakeholders don't take the same strategy as they took in Massachusetts, right? Which was to sort of bid low initially, and then in a declining block basis. The point of my question during the session is that, you know, the vast majority of projects that I co-develop in Massachusetts, we don't even participate in the SMART program. It's not economically viable. So hopefully that doesn't occur here in Connecticut.
Thanks, Chris. Diane, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking that one of the ways, I think the reason why this cap issue is stuck in the legislature is that the legislature by statute and by the Constitution controls the purse strings. But if the cap could be lifted by the governor's office on all projects that have a below market cost, if cost is defined as 16 cents, then the public's going to benefit from all those projects. So whether they're on landfills or whether they're on canopies or any other kind of project, they should be able to be done and not subject to the cap. if they save money, because there is a lot of scuttlebutt in the state about how solar costs money to low and moderate income, or especially low income ratepayers. And I've got a taxing district energy commissioner in Norwalk that said that to my face, even though he's a participant in a commercial solar project himself for his taxing district. He said, well, there's a limit. So we can beat them at their own game, I think. But I don't know whether the governor's office is even receptive to taking some kind of action.
Diane, this is Jeff Masel. You know, the VEDR study is supposed to set that benchmark, which is why we keep beating the drum for getting it. And it was clearly defined in 1935 that they were supposed to perform it, and it was performed, and it was contracted out. A draft was given, and then they never finalized the numbers. And I think this is precisely the point we're trying to make, which is whatever that number is, it needs to be benchmarked. And to Chris's point, we don't mind if they do one every 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, just to reset those numbers to continue to evaluate the value of the distributed energy to the grid. And then that helps PURA, and it helps, I mean, we should unconstrain and unfetter this program so that more renewables are put out there, and they will be developed in conformity with DEEP's sustainable and transparent, you know, efficient program that will be done in a way that's cited responsibly. And this makes total sense. I mean, why we're talking about limiting a program and putting constraints on it and having a reverse auction here in Connecticut, Chris is hitting the nail on the head. We're going to give that value to the EDCs, to the electric distribution companies, and then they're going to pocket it. So we need to just make this a transparent process. What is the value of a project to the grid? Everything below that creates a benefit. Bernie, you know, we could look at taking those benefits and banking them and saying, maybe we can add incentives for landfills and for canopies and other, you know, distressed communities, any of those things, and really just try to, you know, balance the program and take the fetters off it so it can be done in an unconstrained way.
Hey, Jeff, this is Peter Millman. I'm curious, what did you think of the value of distributed energy, that price, which I don't remember, was it around 16 or 17 cents per kilowatt hour?
It was, for in front of the meter projects, 14.1 cents. And we thought it methodologically was deficient, that there were values to add into it. But, you know, we would accept that price if that's where we have to be. But we participated in the docket and said, this is fine, but just looking at the methodology, you left out a couple pieces. And so, and I think the other side, I think the EDC said, we think this is way too high. You've overvalued certain things. And by the way, and this was, I think, a comment which is fair, but is that distributed energy is worth different values depending on where you are in the state. But I think we need to come up with an average value and then revisit it every year or every 2 years and just say, we appreciate if you build a project right next to a substation, that's going to be more valuable than if you build one on three. And by the way, you can't build these projects on anything but three-phase, period, full stop. So on three-phase that's remote, because then it's got to travel a long distance to get to its destination. So we agree, but we just need an average value that is done with a good methodology and good input from knowledgeable groups. And the group that put it together was very knowledgeable, and it was a very robust study, and it's worth dusting off and putting back in front of PURA and the legislators individually and saying, this is the study, can we accept the value, or at least have a conversation about what we would need to firm up the value, and let PURA just say, put that you know, stake in the ground and say, this is the value as of 2021, and we'll look at it again in 2022 or 2023 and continue to iterate and evolve responsibly.
The other thing we really need to do is change the incentive structure around storage. I think we should have a whole nother seminar on storage, because I just got the note, I just put in an 11 kilowatt system on my house, and they're paying only $65 for people to be willing to shut off their system and, or, you know, let the grid use all of their output. And it's ridiculous. So there's no incentive to buy, you know, $7,500 worth of Tesla Powerwall to do that, to be able to give
Diane,
it 2 days of
that-
power instead of just 1 day of power.
That's a great point. I mean, there's a great article I'm happy to share with the group here that Charles Howland, an attorney for the EPA, put out. It's called Innovation on the Edge of the Grid. And when you put a Tesla Powerwall at your house, that's innovation at the edge of the grid. And you should be fairly compensated for that, not, you know, given a rate that was established at PURA. You didn't participate in that docket. And I think it's challenging for us folks. I mean, we're a solar developer that has 10 people in our company. It's challenging for us to spend a lot of time participating in those dockets. As an individual homeowner, it's impossible for you to participate there. And the EDCs live there every day. And, you know, this is a question of who gets the value. And unsurprisingly, you're getting the short shrift in that transaction.
Just one thing, Diane, a friend of mine was putting in battery storage. I would bet that number is not $65 total, but $65 per kilowatt of storage. But I don't know the details, and perhaps you have a better hold on that. But I also wanted to follow up with Jeff about, so in terms of the interconnection docket and interconnection issues, it seems that there's an issue of, if you are a developer of a solar project and it requires interconnection costs, let's say even legitimate interconnection costs, should that be shared with future developers who are going to be able to use that interconnection upgrade or that grid upgrade in that area? Do you have a position on that? Do you have some thoughts about interconnection costs and how they should be shared?
Sure. I think it's a complex area, but let me start with kind of the general high level view, which is, if you pay for system upgrades, generally those costs are shared in the future. If another solar project comes behind you, they're supposed to share. Connecticut, there's been so little done on kind of the distributed energy side. They do not have what I'll say a well-defined or robust policy around that. Massachusetts, they do. That's the difference between 3,200 megawatts and 340 megawatts. I mean, it's just a matter of, you know, the need has presented itself much more frequently in Massachusetts than in Connecticut to arbitrate those kind of questions. There are some things which are automatically shared. For instance, substation upgrades, automatically shared in Massachusetts. Line extension costs are not shared. So it gets complex, and I will be honest, I have to use outside people to help me understand it when we run into the issues. But we think that if you pay for system upgrades and someone comes behind you and can participate, that those should be shared. It's just a basic fundamental principle that, you know, if we, developer A, spend $300,000 on a 3VO upgrade, and someone comes along in 6 months or a year or 2 years and is going to benefit from that 3VO upgrade, they should share the costs proportionately. But there are rules about timing and when those projects come online. But we would be in favor of a, you know, totally transparent sharing process that, you know, has some reasonable time constraints, like 3 years or something like that. There is a non-wires alternative docket right now that the utilities are required to, if they have upgrades of greater than a certain dollar threshold, I think the dollar value is on 500,000 right now. They are required to notify PURA And PURA essentially will now say, thank you, utility, for telling us you want to do an upgrade for more than 500,000. We're going to look at other ways that we could do these upgrades. And is there a way for us to reach out to the private sector? And are there other technologies rather than just a straight substation upgrade or more lines in the ground and more poles that we can accomplish this? This docket just came out last week. And the utilities were very disappointed with that and said, well, no, we wouldn't accept that. We wouldn't allow someone to put equipment basically into our system. And PURA rightfully said, thanks for your opinion, but we're going to allow this to happen. And that troubles us that you're taking a provincial attitude toward allowing cheaper costs and equivalent equipment to be put on. And hopefully this is an indication of where things are going, that the business model is evolving from a regulated monopoly toward a more open network. It may take 20 years to get there, but we're seeing signs that start to point in that direction.
Great, thanks, really helpful. And just thank you, Mark and Bernie and Patrice and all others. Just an excellent presentation as usual.
And great conversation here. This is an amazing group, and we're pushing 2 hours and 45 minutes, and we still got 25 people. So I feel smarter than I was a couple hours ago. So thank you all.
Same here. Thank you.